Okay. All right. I'll just do a quick acknowledgement of country. Welcome, everyone. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the countries we are all meeting on today and recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. We pay our respects to all First Nations people present today. I'd just like to introduce you to Krista Thomas. Krista is a baby sleep specialist who has worked intensively with families to support healthy sleep in the early years of child development. Central to her work is the understanding that every child is an individual and every family's circumstances are unique. As such, she advocates for tailored, holistic approach delivered in a nurturing, judgement-free environment one that supports gradual, responsive change and empowers parents to make informed decisions that feel right for their family rather than conforming to external pressures or rigid expectations. Currently studying psychology. Is that still current?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
good.
I graduate at the end of this year, hopefully.
Perfect. Good on you. With a special interest in child psychology and development, Krista brings a thoughtful and research-informed perspective to her work. She works in partnership with Mind Body Sleep to ensure families have access to ongoing high-quality individual support. Thank you for joining us today, Krista, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Please take it away.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, as you mentioned, I have worked as a sleep consultant, worked with many families, but the way that it all started and my interest in sleep and certainly child development all began with my son Archie, who is now 6. And I have always said that he has taught me far more than I could ever teach him. Um, in more ways than one. And it started from the very beginning. And the reason that I am giving this presentation today on behalf of Mind Body Sleep is because when he was little, sleep was especially challenging for us and for me, someone with very high sleep needs. Um, and I sought out Caroline, who is the founder of Mind Body Sleep, and she was exceptionally helpful. And what I like about Mind Body Sleep is that, as you touched on, Julie, the support that is offered is very much tailored to the individual child, and they are all different. This notion that all babies ought to fit the same routine, ought to settle the same way, ought to respond in the same way to particular settling methods is nonsense. And unfortunately, I think that's become kind of one of the downsides of the sleep consultant industry is that parents become uh, disengaged and disheartened by this idea that their child should be able to be programmed, and that is completely nonsensical. So I just want to preface that today, because what I will be giving is, an overview of the foundations of sleep, some common sleep challenges, and then we will go through routines. But what I want you to keep in mind is that this is a guide, it is not a rule. And in working with many families, what I've noticed is that there are varying sleep needs between children. So what might work for one child will not work for the next, and nor should it. And so the last thing that I would want for anyone to take from this presentation is that there is a one-size-fits-all approach, because there isn't. And sometimes what you might find is that there are some things that might apply to you, your parenting style, or your child, and there are other things that do not, and that is completely fine and normal as well. So let me just minimize this so I can see the screen. So Julie touched on a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I'm a mum. I have a 6-year-old Archie, who was very much not a good sleeper as a baby. However, we did make significant improvements with the help of Caroline from Mind Body Sleep within the first year. I am a qualified sleep consultant. I have a particular passion for child development and child psychology, and I will graduate at the end of this year. And in particular, I am passionate about maternal mental health because, at the risk of oversharing, I struggled significantly in becoming a mum. I think I was of the opinion that because I wanted to be a mum, it would therefore be easy. And when I found it hard, I, having perfectionistic tendencies, assumed that that was a personal failing on my behalf. And it was really difficult. It was such a challenge to kind of hold two truths at the one time, in that I can find it hard and also still love my son intensely and want to be there for him and want to do everything for him, and also still want to be who I am and have my own interests and passions, etc., outside of him. And so a lot of that lends itself, I guess, to sleep, but more broadly to raising children and the approach that you take as a parent. It certainly did for me. So just a bit of the background and for you, and what kind of informs my philosophy on children and being a mum, but also how we approach sleep. So today we've got a few goals. What I would mostly like you to take away is that all babies are different and so are their needs. So again, we're going to be speaking generally. At the end, there'll be time for questions. And so if you have any more specific kind of questions or things that weren't covered in the presentation, more than happy to answer your questions. We're going to cover off some of the common sleep challenges that you can expect, and a lot of those are relative to age or developmental stage. We will go over wake windows, naps, and routine. If you haven't heard the phrase wake windows, what that just means is the amount of time that your child is awake for at any particular age before they next need to sleep. And lastly, we will go over a few sleep hacks and touch on a few settling methods as well. So the presentation will roughly go for 30 to 45 minutes. Again, if you have any questions, you can save them for the end or you can just pop them in the chat. I also don't mind, Julie, as we spoke about before, if you need to interrupt or there's something that I'm covering and I'm assuming prior knowledge. I mean, I know everyone's got children at different ages and stages and different knowledge of, what's required in terms of sleep. So by all means, feel free to interrupt. We are hopefully walking away with a better understanding of sleep needs, foundations of sleep, and routines. So firstly, understanding baby sleep. And again, I know we're all coming at this with different levels of understanding. I certainly entered motherhood not understanding any of it and assumed that baby sleep was exactly the same as adult sleep and that you just put them down and they just go to sleep and it's as simple as that. And my son taught me that it was anything but. And so it is helpful to understand why baby sleep differs from adult sleep, why they have higher sleep needs and how it all kind of works and why it changes over time as well. So if we go from the very beginning and we look at newborns, it's really important to understand that their sleep is disorganized, and that is very normal. So babies aren't born with an internal body clock or a circadian rhythm. And what that means is that they're going to sleep at different times for different length of times. They're going to wake for feeds, and you're not going to see any kind of pattern emerge in a newborn. There are some books out there, one in particular, that has sold many, many copies and insists on a routine from day one. My personal perspective on that is that you would be setting yourself up for failure and disappointment when biologically we know that newborn sleep is disorganized. So expecting it to somehow be organized is an unrealistic expectation to set for yourself and also for your baby. So if it feels like they're all over the place, that's normal, and so they should be. That is not anything to worry about. What happens is that their internal rhythms start to emerge somewhere around 3 to 4 months is when your baby's body clock starts to kick into gear, and they start to produce the hormones that dictate that, which are namely melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, and cortisol, which is our hormone that is kind of wakes us up throughout the day. And so over that first year is when your baby's sleep is really changing a lot and developing. And that's where we tend to see the most sleep challenges. And by the time the child is 2 and onwards, you kind of have I'm reluctant to say this because I know that there are some people that are like, what? No, my child still slept terribly from 2 onwards. But usually what we see is, a bit more consistency, at least, a bit more predictability with sleep from 2, and certainly between 1 and 2 as well. At the very least, there's less naps, but at least you can work out what you're doing with your day. The other thing to understand about sleep is that sleep operates in what's called a sleep cycle. And they change in time. You may have read that a sleep cycle is 45 minutes. The body, if you think about it, does not have an actual clock inside it. And so there is some variation with that. Yes, we say roughly 45 minutes, but realistically, because the sleep cycles shift and change depending on whether it's night sleep or day sleep, where you are in that period of sleep, we can kind of categorize it as every kind of 30 to 60 minutes is some variation of sleep cycling. Babies will naturally enter a lighter stage of sleep at the end of each sleep cycle, and they briefly wake. And this is true for adults too. It's just that we don't remember it. So what happens when you're asleep at night is that you will be waking, you will end a sleep cycle, rouse slightly, and that is the body's evolutionary mechanism of ensuring that we stay safe. So we scan our surroundings, make sure there's not a saber-toothed tiger in the corner, all good, back to sleep, into the next sleep cycle. And so babies do the same, however, they do so more frequently. And that's true for both day and night sleep. The benefit of night sleep is that you have sleep hormones like melatonin on your side, which makes achieving deeper sleep much easier. So if you have a baby whose sleep at night is okay, but day sleep is a bit chaotic, or they're catnapping, which means they're just having very short naps, or it's very difficult for them to nap at all without significant assistance like pram, car, rocking, being held, that is also very normal because it is much harder to achieve day sleep over night sleep. The circadian rhythm I touched on before, so that is the internal body clock. It starts to develop at around 8 weeks of age, but don't expect to see true day or night patterns until around that 4-month mark. Also, at the 4-month mark, you may have read, and I don't want to strike fear into any parents that have a 3-month-old, but a 4-month sleep regression, which is closely tied to a significant amount of developmental changes happening at that time, but also that shift in the way that sleep operates and the development of the internal body clock. So your baby will start moving through many more lighter phases of sleep versus what they do as a newborn. And so sometimes you have parents that have been lured into a false sense of security with a newborn that's managing long blocks of sleep overnight, and then all of a sudden they're waking every 45 minutes at around the 4-month mark, and that is why. Speaking of why do babies wake? Well, there's many reasons. Your baby should wake for feeds relative to their age. So hunger is a very valid and normal reason to wake, and that is not something that we would be looking to fix or change or eliminate. Discomfort, obviously, if they're sick or if they're in pain, particularly for younger babies and newborns especially, who have never had to process milk before, or if your baby has started solids and they've never had to process food before, it is very normal to expect some sort of digestive discomfort and for that to cause them to wake. Temperature is a big one. And I think if I could name one thing that I would say is the simplest fix that I have seen in helping families, and probably also the most overlooked, it is temperature, because temperature will fluctuate throughout the night. So if you're in winter, it will just get colder. If you're in summer, you might dress your baby with, just a singlet and a nappy on at the start of the night, and that might be fine. But then if temperature dips, when they're moving through many more lighter phases of sleep in those early hours of the morning, you may notice that they're waking more if the room has cooled significantly. Developmental leaps is also a huge influence when it comes to sleep disruption. And you see these at varying ages. There is an app called the Wonder Weeks, um, and that kind of touches on where your child is at and the developmental change that they're going through. Some people swear by this. My suggestion would be, again, to just use it as a guide, not a rule, because it is equally as likely that your baby may go through a developmental change and not experience any disruption to sleep. However, the way I try to explain it is, imagine that you have started a new job, and so you're learning a lot about your job, and there's a lot to take in, and your brain's going at a million miles an hour. You may find it harder to fall asleep at the start of the night, or you might find yourself waking throughout the night as well, just going over all of these new skills that you're learning, and it is exactly the same for babies. So if your baby is learning to crawl, learning to sit, learning to pull themselves up, separation anxiety at around 6 months, which we often see flare again at 12 months, all of those things, because there's so much going on for them cognitively, and they don't have the ability to articulate what's going on and to talk it through with you, you do see it play out in behavioral changes. And one of those ways is through sleep disruption. Lastly, they may just need help getting back to sleep. And so this is where sometimes we can see sleep associations, which again is another phrase that's commonly thrown around. But all it means is if a child or a baby has an association with sleep that is not able to remain consistent throughout the night. So for example, and this is not universal, there are plenty of children who can be fed to sleep, rocked to sleep, have any sort of sleep conditions at the beginning when they're falling asleep and not need that replicated throughout the night. But what we do sometimes see is, let's say, for example, we have a baby who is rocked to sleep, then transferred when they're moving back through that lighter phase of sleep, registering, okay, mum or dad is no longer here and the rocking has ceased, waking fully and requiring those conditions to be replicated in order to get back to sleep. So, with all of that said, let's just go kind of back to basics. These are the foundations of better sleep. This is something that kind of applies to all babies and toddlers, no matter the age. And these are things that you can kind of keep, remain consistent with, that will, none of these things are going to be like magic fixes if you are faced with a particular sleep challenge. But what they will do is build some sort of like healthy sleep habits and expectations over time. And because of that, you're going to see more consistency with sleep as they get older. The first one is the awake windows, and we're going to touch a little bit on this later when we get to routines. Wake windows just refer to, as I mentioned before, the amount of time that your child can be awake for before, where they're building enough sleep pressure before they're needing to sleep again. So for adults, it might be 14 hours, and by the end of the 14th hour, I'm absolutely toasted and I need to go to sleep. That's my wake window. For a baby, let's say for a 4-month-old, it might be 2 hours. So the longest that they can kind of stay awake for at any one time is 2 hours before needing sleep again. Over time, and again, I just want to reiterate that all children have different sleep needs. And so I've just said that the wake window for a 4-month-old is 2 hours. You may have a child that has low sleep needs and can stay awake for longer. You equally may have a child that has high sleep needs and is showing you through their sleep cues that they're tired much earlier than that, might be an hour and a half. But the wake window is generally kind of a guide that you can use to understand, okay, how am I going to structure my day? How long have they been awake for? And roughly, when do I think their next nap is going to be due? So I kind of suggest using a combination of the clock as well as watching your baby for tired signs. Again, we don't want to get so caught up in the rigidity of routines that we lose the impetus to follow your natural instinct. No one knows your baby better than you do. And because of that, your best guide as to when your child needs to sleep again is them, and they will show you. So there are obvious ones like yawning, rubbing of the eyes, getting fussy. Some babies get red eyebrows, so they start going red across here. Follow your baby for their cues and learn them, and kind of use the wake windows as a guide for when to start watching them for those signs. That will just help to ensure that you're not trying to put your baby to sleep when they're either undertired, which means they haven't built enough sleep pressure, and it's just going to be an absolute battle for you, or they're just going to be like, hey, what are you doing? I'm absolutely fine. Like, I don't need to sleep. Let's get up and play some more. Or overtired. And it is especially difficult to try and get an overtired baby to sleep, because by that point, their stress hormones have risen, much like with adults, and they're experiencing that kind of wired sensation. So I know myself that if I stay awake past a certain point, it's significantly harder to get to sleep because I've already kicked into that kind of wired state. Same is true for babies. Sleep environment. So we tend to recommend a dark sleep environment for a few reasons. One, the production of melatonin. That is a signal to your body in dark environments that it is sleep time. Your body starts lowering cortisol and increasing melatonin, which is our sleepy hormone, and that's what we want. So it encourages melatonin production. The other thing is that it just reduces distractions. So for little babies, this is less of an issue, but as babies and certainly toddlers get older, it's much easier to be distracted by things in their room. A dark room just eliminates the possibility of that. Temperature, again, I touched on before. This is a really big one. So generally between 20 to 22 degrees. Obviously, in summer, you've got to account for things like humidity. And then winter, there's generally that chill in the air. So, when my son was younger, I would tend to do the like 22, 23 degrees. I would heat his room to in winter, and in summer it was 20 degrees. Just to account for, that the feels like kind of influence. This is a really big one, and I cannot stress it enough. If your baby's room temperature is fluctuating throughout the night, you can expect them to wake if it's changing enough for them to notice it. The same is true for an adult. If I had enough sleep pressure at the start of the night to fall asleep, let's say I'm so exhausted, the room's cold, but I fall asleep anyway because I'm so tired. As the night goes on and as I've had more sleep, my sleep pressure reduces. So therefore, my likelihood of waking from influences in the environment, like fluctuating temperature, is going to increase. So what we often see, and this is particularly true for early rising, is that this becomes very noticeable past midnight. So your deepest chunk of sleep is from bedtime to midnight. From roughly midnight onwards, we move through many more lighter phases of sleep. What that means is there are many more options to wake from disturbances in the environment, temperature being one. So keep that in mind. The other thing is white noise. Now, you don't have to do this. I did with Archie, and it is something that I would always recommend for a few reasons. For particularly young babies, white noise just replicates the sound of what it was like in the womb. It is not completely silent when they're in there. In fact, it's very noisy. And so that can be really comforting. There are some babies that are neither here nor there, like they don't seem to care whether they've got it on or not. I've worked with some babies that absolutely, it's a game changer for them and they can't sleep without it. What I will say is it certainly won't hurt. I've never come across a baby that is impacted by having white noise in their room. So I always recommend it. You can get white noise machines. You can use a phone that you don't need or an iPad and just play white noise from YouTube. It's completely up to you. But I would recommend it. The other benefit being too for day naps is that it just blocks out any sort of outside noise. So like loud cars, birds, someone beeping a horn, it kind of just drowns that out. And they're used to sleeping with noise around them anyway, so it's beneficial. Particularly helpful if you have a baby and other siblings in the house. It helps drown out the noise of them too. In terms of where they sleep, it's in a cot with a flat mattress. Nothing else is in there but a fitted sheet, and that is the recommendation from Red Nose. We want to minimize SIDS risk, and so to do that, we remove any kind of bedding, loose sheets, loose blankets, and toys. Comforters are fine, and I do really recommend them, but from 7 months onwards. And the reason for that is that babies are often swaddled, meaning that they have their arms tucked in. And so if there was a blanket or a toy or something near their face, they wouldn't have the ability to move it away from themselves. And so that's why, particularly while they're swaddled, we always put them down on their back. By 7 months, they will well and truly have both arms free. They will well and truly have the ability to be able to pick up and move a comforter. And so Red Nose considers them safe from 7 months onwards. I do really love them and recommend introducing them for a couple of reasons. One is that it's just a positive sleep association. So when we talk about, and there's a lot of chat about negative sleep associations, you can counteract that with positive ones. And the reason they're positive is because they're able to remain consistent throughout the night. It's something that your child can develop an attachment to, that's going to help them settle and also resettle when they wake. Again, it's certainly not going to hurt. So I would always recommend introducing one. It doesn't really matter what one, it just matters that your child likes it. So whatever, usually the soft ones, jelly cats are always popular, but if it's soft and your child has an affinity with it, it's small enough for them to hold, but roughly teddy-ish size, perfect. Sleepwear and togs. The tog rating is on a lot of the sleep bags and swaddle bags that you will see. Love to Dream and Ergo Pouch are two of the most popular brands. You can match the tog rating to the room temperature. However, what you will probably notice is that a lot of the brands give different tog rating recommendations for different room temperatures. And I had many clients, always in winter, dressing their baby in a Love to Dream sleep bag that was quite thin and recommended for much lower temperatures than what I felt it was appropriate for. And as a consequence, their child was waking. So, kind of use your best judgment. Again, all children are different. Some kids really run hot, and so you have to be mindful of that too. Use your intuition and your best judgment as a parent. Don't let whatever you're, reading override what your intuition is telling you. If your child is sweating, clearly they're very hot. And so you need to probably reduce some layers. But what I would generally say is in winter, if you have heating and you're heating the room to, let's say, 22 degrees, I would put them in a singlet, a onesie, and either a 2.5 or a 3.5 tog sleep bag. With Archie, he doesn't anymore, but as a baby always ran on the kind of colder side and liked to be cozy. So I always went with a 3.5 tog one. In summer, as a general rule, and again, this really comes down to whether you've got cooling or how you're cooling or if you're cooling, but I would cool his room to 20 degrees. I went with like a legless onesie, so ones that just kind of end at the hip, short sleeve with a one tog sleep bag over the top, and that kind of suited him nicely. Again, you have children that run hotter and you can get lower tog rating ones, which is really just kind of like a sheet. So I think they rate that as a 0.3. But you always want to just be mindful of what you're dressing them in relative to the temperature, because we want to make sure, obviously, that they're comfortable throughout the night. That is going to be the thing that promotes longer stretches of sleep. When it comes to feeding and dream feeds, this is probably more relevant to babies between 0 and 1. Newborns, the recommendation is always to feed on demand. As they get older, and again, this is very relative to age, but what you can do, and you can do a dream feed with newborns as well. And sometimes this can be helpful in terms of managing the load. So if there are two parents at home, parent number one might go to bed early, let's say straight after bedtime, or baby's gone to bed, parent number one goes to bed. Parent number two might do a dream feed at around 10 p.m., which would technically allow for a longer stretch of sleep for parent one before parent one has to get up again. The point of the dream feed, and this is how you know, firstly, what it is and whether it's working or not, is that you would, you can do a dream feed if you're breastfeeding. It just means that the risk you run is that, see, I never did it when I was breastfeeding because my preference was just to go straight to bed rather than staying up, trying a dream feed, hoping that it would get me a longer stretch, and then maybe it wouldn't. So that's the risk you run there. If you are bottle feeding, then assuming parent number two is not breastfeeding, it means parent number one, who might be breastfeeding, or even if they're not, gets to go to sleep. Parent number two would give the dream feed in a bottle. And so they literally stay asleep. But because they've got that sucking reflex, as soon as you put the bottle in their mouth, it triggers that sucking reflex. It gives them like a top up, which allows them a longer stretch before they're waking fully for their next feed. So what it might mean is if you're doing a dream feed at 10, they may not wake again for a feed until 2 a.m., meaning that parent one who went to bed at, let's say, 8 has gotten a pretty solid stretch of sleep. Now, that is all very nice in theory. It works for some babies. It does not work for others. So if it's not working for you, don't feel like it's because you're doing anything wrong. It is simply just a matter of it works for some, it doesn't work for others. You will know that it isn't working for you. If your child is waking fully, they shouldn't be. So it should just trigger that sucking reflex. They get a top up, they stay asleep, and parent number two goes off to bed. If they are waking fully, it's obviously not working. If they are having a dream feed, but then waking shortly after anyway, let's say you do a dream feed at 10 and then waking at 11, not working, don't bother with it. My general suggestion when you're trying something new is to give it a crack for about a week so that you just kind of have enough evidence to draw from about like, okay, is this working for us or not? But it can be a really helpful way of getting longer stretches of sleep, particularly in those early days when they are needing to wake for feeds quite regularly, every kind of 3 or 4 hours. Bedtime routines. So again, there's a lot of information out there that kind of prescribes real rigidity around bedtime routine. Don't do what I did and get really obsessive and hung up on everything being particular and the same way at the same time every night. Otherwise, it's not, working well. That's not the point. The point is, again, when we're thinking about positive sleep associations, it's just layering those in. So predictability is really the aim here. It's not about the length. You don't have to do like 17 different steps. This is not a skincare routine. Like, it is just about doing the same thing every night so that your child comes to learn over time that this is what signals bed. This is what we do in the lead up to bedtime. It's particularly helpful with toddlers as well, interestingly, just because that's when you might encounter some boundary testing. And so they really thrive off knowing what comes next. And this is just a good way of offering that. So what it might look like is that you do dinner, the baby then has a bath. After the bath, you might do a baby massage. You might not. Don't worry if you can't be bothered with that. I couldn't either. You might do read some books, which is always a nice thing to do. And then you might have a cuddle and then into bed or whatever your settling method is there. So it doesn't have to be complex. It's just about being predictable and doing the same thing, within reason every time so that the baby or child comes to know what to expect. Um, and then we've got settling. So this is kind of a broader topic, and it's something that is relative to your parenting style, relative to the age of the child, and relative to their temperament and whatever sleep challenge might be presenting. So I would always recommend responsive support. What that looks like will differ based on those things. It needs to be age appropriate, and it needs to match your child's temperament. Newborns or younger babies will need a lot of input to fall asleep. That is very normal. This idea that I went into motherhood with, that you just put a baby down and walk away and like they just go to sleep and it's that easy is, yeah, crazy. And you will just feel perpetually disappointed if that's the expectation. All of that to say, there are some babies that do that. They're not common though, so it's not something that should be expected. It is very normal for young babies to need a lot of assistance to get off to sleep. And in fact, it's encouraged. The reason it's encouraged is because your child's attachment, this is kind of, if you're interested, I would recommend looking up and doing some reading on attachment theory. But your child's attachment, meaning their connection to you and their understanding of their place in the world, all develops in early childhood. And they cannot have any understanding about their safety, either physical or emotional safety, without first learning it from their primary caregivers, which is you. And so the way that we offer that is by being responsive, by giving lots of cuddles, by feeding to sleep, by rocking to sleep, by just offering lots of affection. It is very normal. All animals, or the significant amount of animals in the animal kingdom, do it, but no more so than humans. It is pivotal to their development, and it's for that reason that I am philosophically and fundamentally opposed to putting a baby down, closing the door and walking away and not going back in. It's much more than sleep. It is about their cognitive development. Now on to common sleep challenges. So these are I've just picked a few, and there are many. But the first one, and I think one that comes up a lot and one that does a lot of parents' head in, is catnapping, which is basically just a short nap. It's 30 to 45 minutes. They are completely normal. Very much to do with, for newborns, their sleep being very disorganized, as we've touched on. For babies, but at 4 months, we often see catnapping start to present. And that is strongly linked to, again, what's called the 4-month regression, but is really just a progression in your child's development and the development of their circadian rhythm. And so because their sleep cycles are shortening, it means that they're falling asleep, but they're getting around the end of the sleep cycle back into a lighter phase of sleep and they're waking. We call that a cat nap. If it is happening in a younger baby, it is most likely, and again, I'm speaking very broadly here, but it is most likely developmental. It's not something that is going to happen forever. Like, it can feel like that sometimes, but just know that like your child is not going to grow up and never be able to sleep longer than 30 minutes. It's just not the case. However, there are some things that play a role in triggering catnapping. So if we're trying to get our baby to sleep when they haven't built adequate sleep pressure, as in they're not tired enough, then they're less likely to link sleep cycles, meaning when they get back into that lighter phase of sleep, they're less likely to link and go into their next one. Equally, and this is where it gets confusing, is that the same thing happens, because babies are never straightforward, the same thing happens when they're overtired as well. How to generally know the difference is that if you have a baby that's catnapping and they're waking super happy and seemingly refreshed after one sleep cycle, you can probably assume that they just didn't build enough sleep pressure and that they've had enough sleep. If they're waking screaming or very upset after one sleep cycle, that's indicative of the fact that they're still very tired. They haven't had enough sleep, and potentially they're overtired or they were put down too late. Or something like light or noise has disturbed their sleep, or the conditions with which they fell asleep with are no longer present. And so they're moving into the lighter phase of sleep, they're scanning their environment, recognizing that whatever they fell asleep with is no longer there. Let's say they fell asleep in the pram and now suddenly they're in a cot. That will trigger them to wake completely and call out to you. They signal to you through crying. And so there are a few contributing factors to catnapping, the main one being that it is developmental phase. Frequent night waking, probably the bane of every parent's existence. Again, this very, oh, is someone jumping in there? Sorry. I thought I heard a voice.
Oh, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Frequent night waking is sometimes very normal and to be expected, and should not be something that we're aiming to eliminate. And that would be with young babies, newborns that require feeds overnight. They're meant to wake. They should wake. I fully appreciate that disrupts your sleep as a parent. No one can empathize more because I was not a well person when I was sleep deprived. But it is normal and to be expected, and not something that we would be looking to change if we're talking about a young baby. When a child gets older, and sometimes you might see, so I've had clients whose babies were waking every 45 minutes a night, and they might be 9 months old, 10 months old, 11 months old. That is something that we would be looking to improve, because the child's sleep quality is impacted just as much as yours is as the parents, and it's really, really challenging. And there can be a number of reasons for that. Sometimes it comes down to a balance between day sleep and night sleep. So I'm speaking very generally here, but if you have a baby with low sleep needs, but they're having long naps during the day, that will impact their sleep pressure for the nighttime. Equally, if they're not getting enough sleep during the day, they're an overtired mess come nighttime, you will see those false starts just continue throughout the night. And they are basically in a perpetual state of overtiredness, and so is their parents. So there can be lots of different influences. Temperature is another one that I've touched on before. And also how bedtime begins. So again, this is not always a problem. There have been, I cannot stress this enough, there have been plenty of babies that are fed to sleep for every sleep, and it is not a problem. Baby sleeps well, parents are happy to do it. Great, there is no problem there, keep doing it. There are plenty of babies who are rocked to sleep or cuddled to sleep, and they sleep perfectly fine, in which case, keep doing it. If you're happy, baby's happy, there's no reason to change it. There are some occasions where a baby is rocked to sleep, fed to sleep, cuddled to sleep, has some particular condition that isn't able to remain consistent, and they're waking in order to have those conditions replicated throughout the night. And you'll know, because when I've worked with those families and I've asked them, what is it that you're doing to resettle? It's the same thing. So, well, they're rocked to sleep at the beginning, and then I can't get them back to sleep without rocking again. And so that is when a consult can be really helpful, because then we look at layering in more positive sleep associations, and very gently and at a pace that is relative to you and your parenting style, and also the temperament and the age of the child, reducing the reliance on whatever the settling method is that seems to be triggering the issue. Then we've got early rising. Early rising is just any wake for the day, as in where they're not going back to sleep, before 6 a.m. This can be, again, and this is where it just gets complex, not for sleep consultants that have been doing it and seeing it a long time, but certainly as a parent. And for me, it did my absolute head in trying to work out, why is he starting the day every day at 5 a.m.? And there can be a number of different reasons, similar reasons that contribute to catnapping or frequent night waking. It can be because the wake window before bed is so lengthy that they're going to bed overtired, which you would think would cause them to want to sleep in more, but it has the opposite effect. And so they're more likely then to wake early the next day. Same is true for adults, honestly. Like if you are so wired and you stay awake for so long and you have a few nights of sleep deprivation, you are more likely that's more likely for that to worsen, not get better. So yeah, we definitely see that playing out in babies, or if bedtime is falling too late. The other thing too, keeping in mind, like I mentioned before, we're moving through many more lighter phases of sleep in the early hours of the morning. At the same time, your sleep pressure, which is your impetus for sleep at the start of the night, is diminished because you've already had, let's say, 10, 11 hours if you're a baby. So there is less sleep pressure, which means you're more likely to be disturbed by things like light, like noise, like temperature changing, and those things can contribute to early rising as well. The other thing that is often raised as a sleep challenge, which is not a sleep challenge if you're happy with it, but is contact napping. I put this in here because, again, full transparency, when my son was a little baby, I had this sensation of feeling constantly touched out because there wasn't a moment where I wasn't holding him or being touched. And so in some ways, I really liked that he would contact nap on me. And in other ways, I was really desperate for like a physical break. And so that's where it's like, it's okay to get some support in trying to shift that. You don't have to do, it's not all naps one way or the other. Sometimes I would contact nap with him for one nap and the other one would be in the cot. You can kind of make it work for you. It's not a bad habit, and it's often referred to as a bad habit, and it absolutely is not. And again, this comes back to attachment. It's very, very normal for your child to want to be near you, to be close to you, and to develop a secure attachment from you. Contact napping is one way that we do that. So if it's working for you, keep it. If it is not, then you can just shift to one nap at a time. So I normally say start with the first nap of the day. Normally they have a bit of a melatonin hangover, for lack of a better phrase, from their night sleep. And so, starting with the first nap of the day, if the intent is to get them to sleep in the cot, settling them in the cot for the first nap of the day is a good place to start. You may also have a child who previously has slept absolutely beautifully and suddenly everything's falling apart and you're tearing hair out. That is also very, very common. This is typically a consequence of a progression in your child's development, as we touched on before. And these sleep regressions get a bad name, but usually it's because your child is learning a new skill. So it might be rolling, sitting, crawling, walking, or cognitive growth, more awareness of themselves and their surroundings. We often see babies experience for the first time separation anxiety at 6 months, and again at 12 months. And so that can influence sleep and their comfortability with, sleeping in a cot versus wanting to contact nap or versus wanting to stay with you to sleep. So all of that has gotten a bit of a bad rap, but should be kind of reframed as a sign that your child's development is tracking as it should. The general advice is to maintain your foundations and trust that this will pass. If it doesn't, let's say because we've introduced something and now we feel stuck in a bit of a cycle, that's when seeking support and layering in other things that can remain consistent either throughout the night or for naps, and easing away from the thing that you don't want to maintain is definitely possible. So let's move on to routines. Again, this is a guide, not a rule. There are plenty of high sleep needs babies that would have a shorter wake window than what I've listed there. There are plenty of low sleep needs babies who can stay awake for longer. So this is a guide. Kind of use the clock as an indication for when you should watch your baby. So at 4 months, and again, this would be different if they were catnapping. A catnapping baby is going to need many more naps throughout the day. And what you would notice is that their wake windows are shorter because if they're only getting one sleep cycle, they're going to get tired much sooner than what they would if they had a consolidated nap, meaning more than one sleep cycle. Again, both is fine. Both is very manageable. But what I've got here is just an example routine of 2 consolidated naps and a cat nap that would get you through to bedtime with wake windows of roughly 1 hour 45 to 2 hours 15. A little tip is that, again, this is just, speaking generally, but the wake windows of babies generally increase by about 15 minutes with each month of age. So if we say that the wake window for a 4-month-old is averages as 2 hours, for a 5-month-old, it would be about 2 hours 15, 6-month-old, 2 hours 30. That was always just like a helpful way for me to kind of remember it. My son Archie always had slightly lower sleep needs, and so his were always a bit longer. So at 4 months, he could be awake. His wake window was about 2 hours 15. I only say that not to self-reference, but just to make the point that all babies are different, and you can still, if you want to, build a bit of a routine, but do so relative to your child's sleep needs. At 6 months, the amount of day sleep that they will need, and certainly as they just get older, will reduce. That will just continue right up until they're 2 and they drop the nap completely, and then they only kind of need their night sleep, or 2 or 3. I mean, there's some children that still need a day nap at 4. But usually between 2 and 3 is when they're dropping the nap completely. So at 6 months, we're still on 3 naps, but you can see the wake windows have increased to anywhere between 2 hours 15 and 2 hours 45. Now, what you might have noticed between the routine before and this routine as well, and the same will be true for the following ones, is that the first wake window tends to be the shortest, which is from when they wake in the morning to their first nap. The reason for that is because the first nap is essentially an extension of their night sleep. That's purely just because the melatonin hangover that I mentioned before means that they're probably going to want to go back to sleep sooner after waking in the morning than what they would do for the rest of the day. So it is very common for that first wake window to be the shortest, and then their full wake windows continue throughout the day. You will also notice that because I've got a 30-minute cat nap at the end of the day, the wake window after that is not a full wake window. So again, just thinking about yourself, if you slept for 15 minutes, you're going to need to go back to sleep, and you're tired, you're going to need to go back to sleep sooner than what you would if you had a 2-hour sleep. The same is true for babies. 30 minutes is slightly less than a full sleep cycle, and so we would expect that they would need to go back to sleep sooner after that cat nap versus trying to stretch them out to a full wake window. So they've got nap 1, nap 2, nap 3 is 30 minutes, which takes you 4:30 to 5. And then that last wake window is reduced to 2 hours to compensate for the fact that the last nap was shorter. Just a little tip to be mindful of, if they've had a consolidated nap, meaning multiple sleep cycles, they're going to probably be able to do a full wake window. If they haven't, we reduce it. Again, just using your baby and their sleep cues as the best guide for this. At 9 months, we generally have moved to 2 naps. Now, some babies move to 2 naps earlier. Again, this just comes back to sleep needs. Typically, they're on 2 naps by 8 or 9 months. And the reason for that is because their wake windows have extended to mean that the 3rd nap is now redundant and not needed. There are different ways of doing this, and you may have read the phrasing is like short, long nap configuration or long, short. I still find, generally speaking, at 9 months, a medium, which is what I've got here, is the better kind of general guide, only because their sleep needs and their wake windows would still require them to have 2 consolidated naps in order to get to a regular bedtime. And so you could do an hour in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. You could split it the way I have and done an hour and a half, an hour and a half. You can lean into their natural, like naturally when they wake. And so, I mean, you don't have to be, I've never once woken Archie. That felt like sacrilege to me. But you can either set particular times. Some people like to be a bit more regimented in that way, or you can just wait for when they would naturally wake, and then that's when their next wake window begins, and then you would know to just kind of keep moving from there. But that is a general example of like an 8 or 9 month old kind of nap sleep routine. At 12 months, we're still on 2 naps, but the amount of day sleep that's needed is reduced. And that's probably a better time to be doing the short, long, or long, short that I mentioned before. There's no one that's better than the other. It really just comes down to what your child naturally gravitates towards. Archie always did a better, and by better, I just mean like a longer first nap. And so when he was 12 months, I was doing long, short. So he would have a longer nap where I've got, in that example, a 30-minute cat nap, and then he would do a shorter nap where I've got the longer one. It does not matter. It just matters that it works for you and works for your child. The reason we structure it that way is because if you had a baby this age with this length of wake window and you were doing 2 medium length naps, bedtime would be pushed out so late you would have not a minute to yourself. And we can't have that. So that's why we structure it this way, where we've got one short one, one longer one, and that's just to prioritize night sleep and ensure that bedtime is still falling around that 7 p.m. range. At 18 months, we've moved to 1 nap. Now, the 2 to 1 transition can be really difficult. Do not be surprised if you're just flicking between the two for a number of months. That's completely normal. You might find that one day there's no worries stretching them out to, midday and they just have the 1 nap. The following day, though, they might have accumulated a bit of sleep debt and they're tired by 10, and on that day you might do 2 naps, but a short, long configuration. So that it can be a bit of a process to get them down to 1 nap. That is completely normal and not something that I would try and force, because otherwise you will just end up with an overtired toddler, which is a particular type of hell. So don't do that. Just kind of be guided by your child until they settle into the 1 nap routine. And then we'd be aiming for, a longer nap over lunchtime and meals either side of that. A little tip, if that nap runs short, I would not suggest stretching them out to a set bedtime anyway. Again, we want to avoid overtiredness and we want to avoid an absolute toddler meltdown at bedtime. So I know that there is a general reluctance to bring bedtime forward because the belief is that then they'll wake earlier the next day. Obviously, we don't want to be putting them to bed at 5 p.m. But I would always say, like, if let's say the baby in this example woke at 1, it would be much better to do like a 6:30 bedtime than it would be to try and stretch that baby out well beyond their wake window capacity, both for the lack of peace at bedtime and also the impact that it might have either overnight with more wakes due to overtiredness or early rising the next day, again, due to overtiredness. So I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you're always better off kind of being guided by the wake window than having set times for things, because otherwise you're disconnecting from your intuition as a parent, you're disconnecting from their sleep cues, and also it's just not the best way to meet their needs. So these are just some key takeaways from today, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. But what I hope you remember from today, and I know we've spoken generally and broadly because everyone's baby's age is different, but baby sleep is constantly changing, and that is completely normal. If your child is sleeping great 1 week and not the next, that has nothing to do with you not doing something right, and everything to do with the fact that that is just what babies do. They are forever evolving and changing. There's significant physical and cognitive growth going on. And I think parents are given a very unfair standard and expectation on not only sleep, but what their child should be doing at any one time. And it's certainly not a straight line trajectory. So just know that. The second thing is there is no perfect sleeper. There is no perfect routine. Again, I would hate for anyone to feel like their baby must wake up at a specific time and then they must go back to sleep at a specific time. Unfortunately, a lot of the literature out there kind of prescribes that, and it does make people feel, therefore, if their child isn't being programmed the way that they should, that that's a personal failure, and that's just not the case. This is not a computer we're programming here. This is a real live functioning human. And if you consider that adult sleep is different day to day, I slept more last night than I did the night before, why would it be any different for babies? So just keep that in mind. Sleep progressions are usually developmental progressions and they do pass. It can feel like forever while you're in them. Typically, the sleep disruption that would be associated with a developmental stage might be around 6 weeks. If it was to progress longer than that, then you might require some additional support, which again, I would totally encourage you to seek. But just trust that if you stay true to, the foundations of sleep and the things that you've put in place and being responsive to your child, that this too shall pass. Overtired babies do not sleep better. The worst thing that you could do for your child's sleep is to keep them awake longer. The absolute worst thing. It will not end well for you. In fact, it will be highly stressful for all involved. So definitely don't do that. Really trust your intuition and follow your baby's sleep cues. Consistency matters far more than perfection. Being consistent with the things that you can be, the things that are within your control, which are things like, the kind of sleep rituals leading up to bedtime, positive sleep associations. They're things that are within your control and that you can be consistent with. Where people tend to go wrong, where I certainly went wrong, was trying to aim for perfection and trying to get absolutely every aspect right all the time and never deviating from that, which is not healthy or helpful. Independent sleep develops gradually. There are lots of babies, children who need a lot of assistance to get to sleep. There are lots of babies, children that can be put down, tucked in, say goodnight, walk away, and they're fine. Both are normal. So again, it comes down to attachment and the temperament of the child. I lie with Archie for him to fall asleep every night currently, and so does his dad. And that is completely fine and normal. There will come a day where he'll be like, Mom, get out, So that doesn't need to change. It will just develop gradually, shift and change gradually. And that's completely normal. And ultimately, the end goal is a well-rested family. The end goal is not a baby who just never wakes, especially if they're a young baby and they need to for their feeds. So despite what you may read, you won't do yourself any favors if the expectations are unrealistic. So I'll leave it there, but I will open it up to questions if anyone has any, by all means. Oops, what have I done here? Sorry,
That's okay.
Just so I can see.
Yeah.
No questions.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
What do you think is a good way to resettle a 4-month-old baby when they wake up at night if they're not hungry?
Yeah, good question. And this is where, when we talk about settling methods, and the reason I didn't go into it is because it changes relative to the child's age. Again, temperament plays a lot with this as well. But resettling a 4-month-old is going to be far more hands-on, for example, than what you might offer a 12-month-old. some of the reasons being that it's just like not practical to, shush and pat a 12-month-old on their bum because they're just going to stand up and be like, no, what are you doing? So at 4 months, there's a couple of different settling methods. I generally would suggest what's called shush pat, which is when you roll the baby on their side. So you would hold them with one hand on their shoulder. Again, keeping in mind little babies like that firm, kind of secure touch. So hand on the shoulder and the shushing. So you would get down close to your baby, shush in there or close to their ear and pat the bum in a, rhythmic kind of way. So they're kind of getting the motion. They're a bit like this. And, they're getting the pats as well. That tends to be really soothing. The very important thing to remember with that, though, is that babies must be put to sleep on their back. So it is really important then that you roll them once resettled, roll them back onto their back. But that's one way to resettle a 4-month-old. Now, if they are tired and they're not hungry, because then the follow-up question to that is, well, how would you know? How would you know if they're waking because they're hungry or just because they need to be resettled, or maybe the dummy fell out, or, is usually based on the length of time from the last feed. The other thing is if they're hungry and you're trying to resettle, they just won't go back to sleep. So you will find out one way or another. Another way that I have found helpful for 4-month-olds, if they don't like, because there are some babies that just don't really take to the patting or they wriggle around and it's, I have some parents saying, oh, they're not really going for it. Like they don't really like being held on the side and having their bum patted, is that you would just put both hands, so they're on their back, you put one hand on the chest and one kind of over the belly. And if they like the rocking sensation, you can kind of rock them forward and back, but in the cot or in the bassinet. And then you would, as they're kind of settling, you would ease off on your input over time. So you can offer more motion. If they're more unsettled, as they start to settle, you ease it off. That's also a much easier way because then you don't have to roll them back. They're already on their back. So that's, two examples.
Thank you. How can you stop contact napping if the 10-month-old baby likes being breastfed to sleep? What steps would you take?
Okay, so there's two things there that I mentioned. There's the contact napping and
Breastfeeding to sleep.
breastfeeding to sleep. So I wouldn't try and tackle it all at once. I would firstly suggest working out kind of what your priority is, it would require a conversation to work out where we kind of think the issue is coming from. Again, as I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with contact napping, but I'm assuming it's becoming a problem for you. So is it the contact nap, or is it that they're requiring being fed to sleep and then as a consequence you're nap trapped because you're trying to then do the transfer and they're registering when you're moving away, would be my question. So that would require kind of more conversation there. If that was the case, if the latter was the case, it would be about layering in more positive sleep associations and putting some distance between feed and sleep. So it doesn't mean that you can't feed before a sleep. It just means putting more distance between it. It would mean not doing a feed in a dark room, for example, or if you're doing those feeds for a nap, let's say in your bed, in your bedroom, I would suggest doing that elsewhere. So in the brightly lit lounge room as an example, and then putting some time between the feed and the sleep, and then we would pick a different settling method so that you can still be hands-on and responsive without offering the feed. That would be the first part. And then the second part would be moving away from the contact nap, which I'm assuming is maybe secondary to the feeding to sleep, but it just depends on which one is kind of presenting as more of the issue.
I thought I'd get some follow-up there, but I haven't. But I have another question.
Sure.
My almost 8-month-old cries every time his sleep sack gets zipped up no matter at what point of the bedtime routine I do it. So I end up feeding him to sleep to settle him. What else can I do to change this?
Yeah, that's not uncommon, you know. Um, a couple of things. The first thing that I would say is it's okay for him to be upset. And I don't want that to sound like I'm harsh and I'm saying it doesn't matter because I completely get it. You know, I don't like my son being upset either. But I think sometimes we um, assume we try and kind of avoid the presentation of emotion because it's uncomfortable for us. Um, the reality is the sleep suit isn't hurting him. And if you want that to be a part of the way he sleeps, because you know, because we're not using blankets, for example, because it's the middle of the winter and you don't want him getting cold, then that's probably not something that you're really prepared to budge on, right? And so that's often the predicament that we're faced as parents is like, okay, well, they don't want to do something, but I have to hold this boundary anyway because they're not to know. But as the adult in this scenario, I know that if I don't put the sleep suit on him and it's 7 degrees overnight, that he is going to wake. So that's the first part is that you can, I'm not saying like, don't worry about it, who cares that he's crying. I fully get it. Nothing makes me feel like someone's put a knife through my heart more than my son being upset. What I'm saying is you can provide him all the comfort and provide him reassurance and, you know, validate the feeling, which I think, you know, I started it with the emotional literacy. I started with my son when he was pre-verbal, just so that he was used to the words like, you know, I understand you're upset. I totally get it. You don't like your sleep suit, honey. I totally get it. Um, and then offering support around that anyway. You know, he's allowed to cry. He's allowed to be upset. And you're allowed to say as a parent, actually, this is what he has to sleep in because otherwise he's going to wake, you know, every 3 minutes a night, freezing cold. You know, the reality is that it's not really an option. There is no other option, I'm assuming. And so um, I would just encourage you to, you know, consider that because that will become tested more as he grows into a toddler. The other thing too to consider, because I think, you know, it's two-part. It's that and also can we problem solve here? Like I'm I'm all for being creative and again, no one has taught me more about creativity as a parent than my son. But, you know, because you don't have to die on every hill. Like, you don't have to be like, nope, I said that that's how it's going to be and whatever. You've got to pick your battles. So, the other alternative is that you just dress him in multiple layers. So, if he doesn't like the sleep suit, do we try a different color one that he's not going to, you know, necessarily have the same association with? Or do you just layer him up? Do you put him in, you know, a singlet, two long sleeve onesies? Sorry, you know, a bodysuit and then two long sleeve onesies. You know, you can replicate the layers another way without feeling like you're compromising on safe sleep recommendations. And lastly, what I would say is I I hear you when you say, you know, then I'm having to feed him to sleep. Again, that very much comes down to are you okay with that? And is he staying asleep? Because if you're fine to feed him to sleep, he gets comfort from that, it then means he stays in his sleep suit and he's not waking throughout the night, then there is no problem. So, you know, just I wouldn't get ahead of myself in like thinking that that's a bad habit or, you know, if it's working for the both of you, then just do it. If it's not, and if you're finding that, well, then he's waking and needing more feeds to get back to sleep, and that's something that you're wanting to not do, yeah, you've got the two options. You either persist with the sleep suit and just offer that emotional support, or dispense with the sleep suit and layer him up in other ways.
Great answer. Covered it all. I don't have any more questions. If anyone else, oh, she said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Um, Anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to come off mute and ask away.
Oh, I do.
Have one.
Hi.
Haley,
Hi.
a Playgroup New South Wales staff member, and she has a question.
Yeah. Um, so this is probably going to sound silly because I know you're talking about babies, but I guess for me, my circumstances with my son has been going on since he's a baby, but
Sure.
he's now 9
Mhm.
and like he's very much attached,
Mhm.
really attached. And I still sleep in his bed every night.
Mhm.
And if I even sneak out, he knows like
No.
he's awake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the thought of me even not being with him, it's like he panics. It's like he's got anxiety.
Yep.
Like, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what else to try. I don't
Yeah.
know what to do.
Are you
But
finding that
also
that's just at night, or is that generally, throughout the day and stuff as well?
throughout the day as well. But yeah, nighttime seems to be worse. And he won't sleep with anyone else. He won't. And I've got a little daughter, she's 7, and sometimes she wants mum, but she'll put herself to sleep, but she doesn't care. But he will, want to trade her things or bribe her with things for me to stay with him.
He's
Like
like,
it's, and I was like, oh my God, mate, like, I've tried the nightlight, we've had relaxation music, I've massaged him, we've bathed, I was like, I don't know what to do. And I just
yeah.
heard you mention before about attachment therapy,
Mm.
or if there's any great websites or anything that I could look into.
Yeah, it's attachment theory, which is essentially, it was research into how attachment was develops between primary caregivers and babies who then grow into children. And it started, a few decades ago and has really grown significantly in our understanding, not just of child psychology, but also how we operate as adults and how we relational psychology too. So how I interact with you, how you interact with me, and the lens with which we see the world. So if you look up attachment theory, there is a wonderful doctor called, I've got his book, it's not on the shelf, Dr. Billy Garvey.
I was writing
He,
this down.
Dr. Billy Garvey has written a book called 10 Things I Wish You Knew About Your Child's Mental Health or something like that. It's not just about, mental health, but it is about, you know, that he's a developmental pediatrician, and it's about what we can reasonably expect of children relative to their age and stage. Um, that just like adults, all children have different temperaments, and it sounds like, yeah, maybe your son might be experiencing some uncomfortability or some nervousness, particularly at night, which is so common. Even amongst babies, it's very, very common, and lots of kids, toddlers need night lights or comforters or need to sleep with mum or dad or will wake and need to make sure that mum and dad is still there. It's a protective, instinctive mechanism that is built into us, and in some people, it's stronger than others. And so I wouldn't say that that's a problem, and again, unless it's a problem for you. And I'm sure there's a part of you that's like, yeah, well, I really wouldn't mind sleeping in my own bed without
But
like,
like I quite enjoy it because I think once he gets to an age he's not going to want to do it
yeah,
anymore. He'll be
yeah,
like, whatever. But in my mind I'm like, it's concerning that he just won't go off by himself. And I think like he's even withdrawn himself from going to friends' houses for sleepovers. Like he's worried I'm not going to be here, I'm going to go. Like I
yeah.
just trying to find out why he's
Yeah,
not.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I always consider behaviors as a signal for a
Okay.
need. Okay, so treat it as kind of evidence or a signal of a need. And then the exploration would be, what is that need? And I would say that there might be some worry, there might be some anxiety, again, without knowing him or you or that, his circumstances. But and then how do we meet that need? How do we build the confidence without it being so extreme that we're asking too much? What you
Yeah.
do, and this is true for 9-year-olds as it is for 1-year-olds, the ask has to be um, a small stretch, not a big jump. So what you might do from a sleep perspective, and I think, it's if it was just this, if you just said, it's just this, but I don't mind it, I quite like it, he won't always want to sleep next to me, I'd be like, no problem, keep doing it. What's the
Yeah.
issue? There is no
Okay.
issue. Just because other kids sleep by themselves and if you're happy, there's no problem. But
Yeah.
I think probably what you touched on that might be worth more investigation is that, that nervousness is now trickling into impacting social interactions or opportunities with
Yeah.
sleepovers. And so I think the way around that would be just small, gentle stretches on the ask. So, if you wanted to not be in his bed, it would be about like, I'm still here with you, mate, but I'm going to be next to you. I'm not in your bed anymore. Now, you don't have a problem with it, so I wouldn't even. That's called,
Yeah.
the process is called gradual withdrawal, which basically just,
Yeah.
it's a slow and gradual process of moving out of the room. And you do that as slow as you need to and at a pace that feels right for you and right for him. But because it's working for you, I wouldn't even say you need to do that. Where I would direct my attention would be more in what is it that this behavior is trying to solve for. So he might be feeling something, and this behavior is trying to solve for that issue. For example, if he is, I don't know, let's say he was having chronic nightmares, but they don't happen if mum's here. Children are very
Yeah.
adaptive and they're clever, and so he would be solving for that problem. So my advice would be to just, have some conversations with him and talk and think a bit more deeply about what might be below the behavior, because the behavior is signaling something.
Yeah. 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 I feel like you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, even if he has friends come over here, he'd be like, Mum, can you come and sleep with us?
Yeah,
Like he always just, and I was like, oh, I
yeah,
don't know if that's healthy. Do you know what I mean? Like sleeping with other
yeah,
people's kids, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he'll generally wait till they fall asleep and then leave them there by themselves and come and jump in with me.
Oh, bless him. Yeah, again, like it's, not a problem unless it's a problem for you, but it is definitely something that you could explore further with. It's not, I don't want this to sound like, I think whenever people hear like psychologist, it like must mean that there's a pressing mental health issue. It's completely okay to be proactive and go and see a child psychologist as well. I've seen a child psychologist for my son, sometimes to deal with like very pressing issues, and other times because I just want guidance around, trajectory or how to handle something that's coming up. So you don't always have to wait for crisis point for guidance. And they may be able to give you a bit of a plan. They may be able to do some sessions with him. And so, it's a bit of a collaborative thing, to help address whatever it is that's underneath.
And I feel like whatever it is, it's just with me because he's not worried about anyone else. He's thriving at school. He's very sporty,
Yeah.
big high achiever, but just with me. And I feel like it is an attachment thing. And
Yeah.
like I said, I don't mind. Like it doesn't affect me. But I was like, is it something that I'm missing or I should look into more? Or is it okay?
No, I
Like,
mean, it's very normal for children to want to be with their parents. It's very normal. There's a problem in our society that has said that that's an issue that needs to be fixed. The only reason that I would be investigating it at all is because you've raised that it's impacting his social opportunities.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the only reason. But
yeah,
outside of that, you're 100% right. He's not going to be 15 and still in bed with you.
yeah,
Like there will come a day where our
yeah.
children are like, don't want a bar. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's right. And I'm very nurturing. I mean, I still got my 18-year-old at home. I'm like, oh, you don't have to move out. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's good to know. And I think I might look into reading to the attachment theory and just see, just interesting, but I'm not
yeah, yeah.
phased
It's
by
it's
it.
good.
But
It's good to know if nothing else.
yeah, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Um, We might just, I'm just mindful of the time. We
Yeah.
might just end questions there. And then if anyone is interested in a consult, or if anyone has any kind of outstanding sleep concerns, then I will put the contact details of Mind Body Sleep there. There's the website, Instagram, email, and there's lots of different ways that you can seek support. You may just find it helpful just to go through. Caroline's offered so much general but free advice through her Instagram, which is really, really helpful as well. So
Can't see the details because your lovely face is in front of them.
oh, what have I done?
No, it's been great. Otherwise, it's just
Sorry.
on that side. That's all.
Hang on, how do I get rid of my head? How do I hide my head? Wait, if I do this?
Yep,
Oh,
perfect.
that's better.
There you go.
Okay. All right, there you go. So it's Mind, Body, Sleep.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We will have this recording up on our website anyway, and Chris is going to share the slides. So anyone that wants any more details, please reach out, and we can help with that. But I might stop the recording now.
Sure.